In the vast desert of the American West, where the land seems to swallow everything it touches, survival is a luxury few can afford to dream about. An endless horizon of towering mountains and desolate valleys, where nature imposes itself as the dominant force, leaving few traces of civilization. The small dusty towns that appear from time to time are fragile refuges where men and women try to build a life amid the unforgiving vastness. But the tranquility of these places is fragile, like a storm about to form, and life there is a constant battle for existence. The railroad, which tears through the land with steel tracks, is a symbol of progress, but also of oppression. It brings with it large corporations that push small farmers and cowboys to the margins of society, forcing them to fight for every piece of land. The cattle ranchers, huge and unbeatable, monopolize vast grazing areas, mercilessly taking the properties of the weaker ones. The battle between the unchecked ambition of the big companies and the resistance of the simple workers is constant but silent, an undeclared war that slowly consumes the hope of those still believing in a better future. In this unequal landscape, the cowboys and small farmers, men and women forged in the harshness of the desert, are more than just rural workers. They are the last defenders of a freedom that is already being slowly taken from them by outside forces. On the margins of the law, but with a strong sense of justice, they seek an independent way of life, far from the heavy hand of the government and the corporations that dictate the rules. They are men and women who, in their hearts, know that true freedom is not something you buy, but something you conquer, even if it means facing everything and everyone to keep it. But it is not just the fight for survival that keeps them alive. It is the belief that the West can still be a place where a man can own his destiny, where the land still holds value, and where freedom still means something. And as the big corporations grow and the local government becomes more corrupt, these cowboys know that to protect their lands and their principles, the fight will be inevitable. They are ready to do whatever is necessary without fear, for the resistance is already in their hearts, and no matter how hard the powerful try to crush them, they will not bend. Life in the West is not for the faint of heart. The scorching desert heat burns the bodies and dries up the soul. Dust covers everything, seeping into every crack and making the air feel dense and suffocating. In the isolated villages, the sound of wagon wheels on the dry ground is the only melody heard, while people, exhausted, drag themselves from one place to another, trying to make a living. The harshness of life in the West forges men and women of great strength, those who, despite the hardships, do not give up on their dreams. But like everything in life, adversity has its limits, and the fight for survival becomes even crueler as the system oppresses the weaker ones. As the railroad system and big corporations push forward, taking land, farms, and dreams by storm, the people of the West watch as their lives are irreversibly altered. The laws are no longer there to protect the people, but to serve the interests of those who control the power. The corporations, with their thirst for profit, have no scruples about using any means to expand their dominion. The railroad, which once brought the promise of progress, is now a symbol of oppression. Each track that stretches another mile, each station built, is a direct assault on the men and women who inhabit those lands, tearing away their land and their future. The tension between the small farmers, cowboys, and the big corporations has never been higher. The farmers try to cultivate their land, but the pressures are unbearable. The cowboys, once the kings of the land, are now treated as mere workers who can be discarded at any moment. The local government, blind to corruption, does nothing to protect the weak. Instead, it aligns with the corporations, allowing these giant companies to take whatever they want. The sense of helplessness grows with each passing day, but the revolt also begins to grow quietly in the hearts of the men and women of the West. In this scenario, the protagonists of the story begin to stand out. They are ordinary people like any other, but with unwavering strength. They are cowboys, small farmers, rural workers, all united by a common goal, to fight for survival and the right to live freely. However, not all cowboys are the same. Some are simple, with their eyes focused on the land, while others are driven by pain and the desire for vengeance. But they all share one thing in common: the certainty that the fight ahead will be their last chance to reclaim what has been taken from them. At the heart of this revolt, there are striking figures whose stories intertwine in a common destiny: to fight for freedom and survival. The protagonist, an experienced cowboy with a deep connection to the land, is a man of few words and many actions. With scars from the past and an unwavering will, he is not only a defender of his own land, but also a symbol of the silent resistance growing among small farmers and cowboys. His name is known in the small towns, and his determination is respected. Although few understand the weight of pain and sacrifice he carries. By his side is Maria, a relentless woman and strategist. She grew up in the West, the daughter of a farmer whose land was taken by the railroad and the corporations. Maria has an innate talent for leadership, and with the loss of her family, she developed a visceral hatred for the powerful. Her fight is personal, but she doesn't allow herself to be consumed by it. Her vision and intelligence make her a natural leader within the movement, as she knows exactly how to move the pieces on the board, whether in an ambush or a direct confrontation. Another crucial character is Samuel, a former Civil War soldier, who found in the West a way to escape his past, but not the violence that followed him. Samuel is more than a man of weapons. He is a war strategist, someone who understands that power lies in the details. His heart still carries the shadows of war, and he finds redemption in the battles fought in the desert. His loyalty is unquestionable, but his experience makes him cynical, and he constantly questions the morality of the resistance's actions, especially when violence becomes inevitable. Lastly, there is James, a young cowboy, still full of ideals, but with a growing hatred for everything the corporations have done to his family. James is impulsive, often acting before thinking, and his youth is both a strength and a weakness. He has everything to prove and wants to show the world that he can make a difference. His journey will be marked by challenges, but he will be the one who perhaps understands the true cost of the revolution they are trying to ignite. These characters, with their complex motivations and inner demons, become the foundation of the resistance. They are not heroes in the conventional sense. They are men and women who, despite adversities and losses, remain standing, knowing that the future of their families and land depends on the courage of each one of them. Together, they form an unlikely group, but their unity becomes a powerful force against a system that seeks to crush them. ***, the tension was already at its breaking point. But the true spark for the revolt comes when a powerful corporation, with the support of the local government, begins a new assault on the farmers of the West. The goal is clear: take the last available lands to expand the railroad and increase their profits. The lands that were cultivated and passed down through generations are now seen merely as obstacles to the company's plans. The cowboys, farmers, and their families who live there are just numbers in a profit spreadsheet. But for them, these lands represent the only thing they have and the only legacy they can leave. The violation comes brutally and unexpectedly. When the local government issues a decree forcing the forced sale of the land, the farmers are caught by surprise with no time to react. The cowboys, who had previously managed to negotiate with the corporations, now find themselves surrounded by mercenary troops sent to ensure that the order is carried out, even if it means using violence. The arrival of these troops, imposing and well-armed, ignites the spark of revolt. Oppression is no longer a distant threat. It is a brutal and relentless reality that challenges all the values the small farmers and cowboys once held. The protagonist, who had already lost everything, now sees his last hope ripped away before his eyes. His farm is invaded and destroyed, his cattle taken, and the last part of his life which he had built with so much effort is torn apart. It is at this moment of total loss that he decides that there is no room for negotiation anymore. War is about to begin, and he will not face death without fighting. Maria, who had tried to negotiate on behalf of the farmers, returns devastated from her meeting with the corporation's representatives. She knew the system was corrupt, but seeing firsthand the indifference with which the suffering of the people was treated was a hard blow. She is the first to raise the banner of resistance, gathering the others to form a plan. The revolt needs to be organized. Otherwise, there will be no chance against the system's forces. But not all the cowboys are ready to move forward. Fear and doubt begin to creep in, and many question whether it's worth losing everything for something that may not succeed. However, the unity strengthens with Maria's speech, and the revolt starts to take shape. The fight for freedom is about to begin, but the cost will be high, and many will have to sacrifice everything, including their lives, to ensure that the West remains a place where justice can be done. The revolt, which was once a vague idea in the minds of a few, now gains strength and direction. The oppression of the corporation and the complicity of the local government ignite a flame in the hearts of the men and women of the West, who until then had only been surviving. Under Maria's leadership, the movement begins to organize in a more strategic manner. They know they cannot win with brute force alone, so they must use the terrain to their advantage. Employing guerrilla tactics and surprise attacks, Maria, with her sharp intelligence, begins to recruit allies from all corners of the West, other cowboys, angry farmers, even some ex-soldiers and hunters who have nothing left to lose. Their union becomes the only hope of resisting. With the formation of the movement, the first attacks begin. Sabotages of railroad tracks, ambush against mercenaries, and quick strikes at the corporation's troops become routine. The courage of the group is undeniable, but the fight is far from fair. The forces they face are much larger and better armed, and the number of dead rises with each clash. But contrary to what the powerful had imagined, the resistance does not break. On the contrary, it grows. Each victory, no matter how small, feeds the flame of revolt even more. As the movement strengthens, the protagonist finds a new sense of purpose in his life, despite his losses. He begins to lead his men in fierce battles, driven by a determination that comes not only from the pain of losing his land, but from the hope that, if they fight with courage, perhaps they can restore freedom to the West. However, the fight is becoming increasingly personal. Each battle brings more wounds and sacrifices. He watches his friends and allies fall by his side, and the responsibility of protecting the few who remain starts to weigh heavily on his shoulders. But he doesn't give up. The war is here, and he's ready to fight until the end. Meanwhile, the local government begins to realize the growing power of the resistance. The first victories of the revolt deal a heavy blow to the authorities, and a series of secret meetings are held between the leaders of the corporations and local politicians. They know that if they don't stop the rebels now, they will lose total control over the region. They begin sending more troops and resources to crush the resistance, but also intensify their manipulation tactics. They try to divide the movement with promises of power and wealth, but they know they cannot trust anyone. The rebels, in turn, are aware of the enemy's tactics, and the fight for survival continues, fiercer than ever. The turning point of the story happens in a moment of great hope when the resistance carries out a successful attack on the corporations' headquarters, destroying vital weapon and resource depots. The movement, in its victory, feels for the first time that they can truly defeat the system, but the relief is short-lived. The victory also comes at a great cost. The protagonist, in a moment of distraction during the operation, is captured by the mercenaries and taken to a secret location where he is tortured for information about the resistance's plans. His capture is a brutal blow to the movement's morale, and the sense of despair begins to spread quickly among the rebels. Maria, who had been the mind behind the strategy for the attack, now finds herself without her leader and the groups. Morale begins to crumble. Fear spreads among the members of the resistance, and many start to question whether the fight is still worth it. The protagonist's former allies, including Samuel and James, have divided opinions on the next step. While James, filled with rage, wants to go after the leader to rescue him at all costs, Samuel, with his experience, understands that such impulsive actions could result in more deaths and destruction. The division within the movement is clear, and the future of the uprising seems uncertain. But amidst the darkness, a new alliance emerges. Maria, determined not to let the resistance disintegrate, begins to liaise with other groups in the region, seeking support from farmers and even other cowboys who had not been involved in the conflict until then. She knows that without a leader, the movement will fragment, and it will take uniting forces again, no matter how difficult the conditions may be. At this point, the resistance becomes more than a fight for freedom. It becomes a fight for the very survival of the movement, and Maria steps to the front lines, leading with fierce determination. As the resistance reorganizes and the forces of the system prepare to crush them once and for all, the final confrontation looms. The movement is more united and stronger, but the challenges are immense. The local government and the corporations know they can no longer underestimate the rebels, so they concentrate their forces to defeat them definitively. More soldiers are sent, more resources are allocated, and the tension in the West reaches unsustainable levels. The final battle will not only be a physical fight, but also a battle of ideals and survival. The protagonist, now recovered and determined to bring the fight to an end, prepares to lead his men in a frontal attack on the corporation's main stronghold. With Maria by his side, the resistance plans a direct offensive, knowing that this will be the moment to decide the fate of everyone. The strategy involves a simultaneous attack on several fronts, using both guerrilla tactics and direct confrontations to destabilize the enemy. The battle will be fierce, and the losers will have to pay a high price. The courage of each combatant will be tested to the limit. On the battlefields, the corporation's troops are imposing, well armed and determined, but the resistance has something they don't: a greater cause. Each cowboy, each farmer, each member of the resistance is fighting for their land, for their freedom, for everything they have lost. The dry, hostile terrain, known to all, becomes the stage for a brutal fight. The sound of gunfire echoes through the desert, while the dust rises like a shroud over the chaos of battle. The protagonist and his allies face the corporation's elite forces with bravery, but the battle is uneven. Death and sacrifice mark every moment, but they know that the price of freedom is always high. Maria, tireless and strategic, fights alongside her people, coordinating the attacks and ensuring reinforcements arrive in time. However, she knows that the fight will not only be against enemy soldiers, but also against fear and doubt that arise among the rebels themselves. When the battle reaches its climax with losses on both sides, a final sacrifice will be needed to ensure that the West will be free, or at least that the struggle will not have been in vain. After the final battle, the West will never be the same. The resistance, though devastated and with few forces remaining, manages to destroy the heart of the corporate power and change the course of history. The corporations are forced to negotiate, and much of their land is returned to the small farmers and cowboys. The blood shed and the lives lost are not in vain, but the scars of the struggle are deep and permanent. The protagonist, now a man marked by war, walks through a land that, although conquered, will never be entirely peaceful. The future of the West is uncertain, but the freedom gained through so much effort brings a new hope. However, the victory is not total, as the challenges are still immense. The West, although transformed, remains a place of desert and constant struggle. The prominence of the resistance movement is not forgotten, but the cost of the revolt becomes part of the collective memory of those who survived. They know that even in a new world, there will always be challenges to face, but for the first time, they are certain that, together, they can resist. Maria, now recognized as a historical leader, continues with the mission of helping rebuild what was lost. The fight has not ended. It has only taken a new direction. The protagonist, bearing the weight of leadership, decides to step away to live in peace, but knows that the West, with its hard-won freedom, will always be his home. James, with his youth and bravery, becomes a new symbol of hope for the next generation. And Samuel, the ex-soldier, finally finds his redemption, though he will never forget the price of war. The West, now a place where the winds of change have blown strongly, is both a promise and a reminder that freedom is earned and its price is always high. What began as a fight for a piece of land now transforms into a fight for the very soul of the West. The future will be rewritten by those who survived. and the memory of those who fell will be eternally honored.